Okay, Anna, why don't you start off?
Thank you, Christy. My name is Anna. I am the founder of Craft AI, where I help demystify AI for leaders, helping them achieve organizational success through AI.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Anna. My name is Christy. I'm part of the Anna team, currently a product manager as well as the lead product designer. I'm helping build really cool AI products with Natan, who will introduce himself next.
Hi, my name is Natan. I'm the founder of Anode AI. We're an artificial intelligence startup in New York, helping make AI more accessible.
Cool. So in today's talk with Anna, Anna will be talking about the rapidly evolving AI landscape, organizations that are racing to adopt cutting-edge technologies to gain a competitive edge. However, a lot of successful implementation of AI goes beyond just mere technical prowess. It demands a commitment to responsible AI practices. During Anna's talk, she will demonstrate the impact of responsible AI on organizational success and highlighting how a user-first and human-centric approach is a key to take the proof of concept projects into fully fledged, production-ready services that are aligned with your goals. With that being said, Anna, feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Christy. And one thing you forgot to mention, I'll be joined by Christy and Nathan in this conversation. Let me start sharing my screen. I think I need your permission, Christy, to share my screen.
Oh no, the usual. Here, let me.
Technical issues, guys. We're all working in AI, and we still face it.
I know, super cool. Okay, you should be able to share a screen now.
I see it. Awesome. So thank you, Christy, again for introducing the topic. I want to jump right in. Start with an AI technology of another era. If you don't know, it was called image recognition. Now it is closely tied to facial recognition. And this is how it started out. I don't know if you guys remember, but AI being able to detect like cats and puppies in photos was how a lot of people within the deep learning AI space started noticing this paper and getting into it. And at that point, it was like, what harm could come out of a machine detecting a puppy and a cat was my first thought that came up. And this is just looking at the paper, especially noting the timeline, because I mentioned this is from another time. So the seminal paper that led to this idea of RCNN, which was the technology that allowed it, was released in November 2013. So exactly like 10 years ago, a couple of more months. And then it has been evolving. There's been like notable papers throughout till it like kind of plateaued around like 2020. And then this is some looking at some real world case studies of it. So I'm gonna be like playing a video clip, roughly like 1 minute or so we can like see how this technology was applied. First, let's look at the agriculture video. This was a specific case study from India.
AI-powered robots offer a solution. This one is equipped with precision cameras that scan the ground in real time, programmed to avoid wasteful spraying.
The way spraying is done in India is on an acre level. And our mission is to boil that down into a plant level decision making. Just by spraying only on the plant, we are seeing a 56% savings.
Improved rural digital connectivity and government support for agri-tech startups has pushed farm innovations. But even now, just 2% cultivators use tech in farming.
We really need to enable the digital public infrastructure. And second is going to be public-private partnerships. India will always be resource constrained. We possibly are perhaps lowest in the yield level. We possibly are pretty much constrained on finance and insurance services for the farmers. And
So I wanted to stop there specifically because, as you saw in the video, it started out with how the technology was used, but it ended with asking questions beyond technology. It was talking about like public-private partnerships. It was talking about rural digitization and how government can work to like make this more accessible. When I'm going to be playing the second video, I want us here and whoever is watching this to kind of like think about the tone and the content as well. So this is a specific case study from China.
是表示扭蛋录力显示的很高，
Teachers at this primary school in China
蓝色是90了，
know exactly when someone isn't paying attention.
白色就是你可能跟网络还没有连接好。
These headbands measure each student's level of concentration. The information is then directly sent to the teacher's computer and to parents. China has big plans to become a global leader in artificial intelligence. It has enabled a cashless economy where people make purchases with their faces. A giant network of surveillance cameras with facial recognition helps police monitor citizens. Meanwhile, some schools offer glimpses of what the future of high-tech education in the country might look like. Classrooms have robots that analyze students' health and engagement levels. Students wear uniforms with chips that track their locations. There are even surveillance cameras that monitor how often students check their phones or yawn during classes. These
So I'm going to stop right there. So this video came out about 4 years ago. So in terms of the evolution of that technology, that was about like 5 years after the first paper was released. And as I mentioned, the AI in agriculture video, it came 2 months ago. So just to put in perspective, like the timeline we are talking about when it comes to the specific technology of object detection. So my main takeaway between these two videos was like how one put the technology first and the second one put the user first. And I think it was also part of the timeline because like 10 years into the technology being out there, we are asking like questions that are centered around the users, the end users. And about like midway between that, we were reporting it in a way that puts the technology first. And I think if you think in that framework, it helps to kind of like see the differences in applications between these two use cases. What do you guys think?
These two videos were super interesting. Thank you for sharing. I think it's like quite often when we're looking at AI and actual case studies, we see them happening a lot in industries such as like software development or, finance and all those like internal business structures, but we rarely see AI being implemented in like agriculture or education. I guess like something in the first video that really stood out to me was they were talking about how only 2% of agritech is implementing AI. But it seems like the main purpose of AI is to reduce like manual and repetitive tasks. And agriculture seems to be a sector that has a lot of that. And AI has the potential to really reduce that. And you were talking about how the first one seems to be really technology focused. What other like constraints do you see in terms of more rapid adoption in the agriculture space for implementing AI to reduce like manual tasks? I wonder if that was a clear question, but yeah.
Yeah, I get your question. It's incentive to actually do that, and support. So resources, but for a domain like agriculture, I think you would need a lot more support from investors, government investing, or like private investing. I think that's what differentiates agriculture to me in particular, and it's also about the geography. But one thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm going to in the next slide, is, which again, Christy, you pointed to, is like why in the US we are not like thinking about these applications first, because I think there is a regulatory component to it. So the next case study, or like this piece of news, is what I want to highlight about regulation in AI, particularly in the context of United States of America. So Rite Aid was implementing this technology, and December of 2023, this came out. So FTC sued Rite Aid for using, or Rite Aid is banned from using AI facial recognition, which is essentially powered by object detection, the technology behind it. After it was found, Rite Aid deployed the technology without reasonable safeguards. And from Rite Aid's perspective, how this affects them is they can't use this technology for 5 years. I don't know if it specifically pertains to facial recognition or AI. And you can also see how it, the technology, when it was not put in place with safeguards, it particularly targeted women and people of color as shoplifters. And this also ties to similar technology that was used for identifying someone's propensity to commit a crime. There was specific softwares that was used in like US judicial system. And that was also called out through a publication called ProPublica, where they like analyzed the risks and biases associated with facial recognition. So that's just like the real implications of a technology as it moves through this cycle, that there comes a period when you have to put your end customers first. Whatever the technology promises, I think in the end, how it applies to your business is really driven by how it applies to your end customers.
Yeah. This is also like a super interesting case because it's like very contrasting to kind of what's going on right now in terms of making sure that you don't, for example, this one is talking about biases of facial recognition and targeting like minorities, right? And I'm wondering if it's because of the human feedback and the inherent biases that are being fed into this particular like AI model. And then we have Gemini going on recently where it went under fire for being like too trying to compensate too much for the biases portions. So I guess like what are some of your thoughts in terms of movements to make sure we're being like responsible while like not overdoing it, as we see with Gemini's like recent
Yeah, I think like one big idea that I want to put out there is that we have encountered this before in terms of other emerging technologies. So I gave the example of object detection as one of the AI technologies, but even putting AI away, we have seen it when internet happened. We have seen it when mobile happened, mobile technology, even as recently as Bitcoin or non-fungible tokens. So I think like it's important for us to look into our history, into our collective history, and see like how we can learn from these cycles and democratize the process so that more and more people can be brought into this conversation, because it is essentially about balancing, right? You mentioned Gemini, and you mentioned like these technologies at the end, like the problems that we are seeing as a result of AI is not new, but it's just like caused by different things. At the end, I think it's coming back to those like same old problems that we have been struggling as a society. So I think like not as a solution, but a good way to deal with it is like to bring more people into it. With that being said, I just want to like bring attention to the timeline that I've been talking about. And this is something called Gartner's cycle, specifically for emerging tech, but I think it can be applicable to like a lot of other fundamental shifts that we have seen in society. Internet or like mechanization, specifically talking about the object detection case that we saw. There was this first part that was really technology driven, like, you know, seeing like cats and dogs in pictures, identifying that. And that like really piqued our expectations. And we saw like when we are putting that technology first, like how innovative it can get, and we like really push the realms of innovation. I think that's where it peaks. And then the question of monetization comes, or like service comes. And that's where like we realize a highly an innovative product and a highly serviceable product sometimes don't go hand in hand. And then we have this like trough of disillusionment. One thing I wanted to highlight is like this is the phase that really propels the technology forward. And like in terms of the approach, it's really putting that technology on the pedestal and like making decisions around it. And then we saw the implications of it, like regulatory implications, lawsuits, biases, and underrepresentations that we have seen, or that we usually see a lot as a society, but that getting reflected in these technologies as well. And that's where the disillusionment happens. And then what really pushes us from this trough towards a new revival, in my opinion, is putting users first, or the end customers first. And that's where like the real use cases start developing. For an example, we saw the AI in agriculture part. It's like the same idea, object detection. Instead of detecting faces and monitoring, it's like looking for specific plants to make the industrial process more efficient. So the end user there are like all of us, whoever consumes food. And we see the productivity gains that come from making the technology come second to the end users. What are your thoughts on that? I know like Nathan, we connected over human-centric AI or human-centric development of technology. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I would largely agree. I think right now, at least, we're in a stage where everyone's really excited about all of advancements of generative AI and like the new capabilities in technology. And people get really excited by like the vision of what, the technology can actually do, without kind of realizing a lot of the inherent limitations behind like today's LLMs in regards to like hallucinations or messing things up or bias, right? And it's really easy to kind of build these POC concepts where you can kind of see the promise, but it's really difficult to kind of actually keep the expectations up to the point where you can really deliver production-ready solutions to end users. So I think there's been this kind of learning curve on how to actually make AI products really helpful to the end user who's using the product. And I think when people kind of begin to figure that out, that's where the real value drives in. So I'd agree with most of your points.
So just to like tie all of that together, again, going back to the idea of biometrics and facial detection in the state that it is now, This was just a resource that TechBetter put together around the do's and don'ts of facial recognition. And just like it ties to like some of the things that you mentioned, Nathan, and what we saw through that like cycle and what it means to like really put your users first. So in Disney World, they take your biometrics. I thought for a long time that it's like mandatory. Even being in AI and in this field, having like researched on surveillance using AI, I still fell for it. I did it and I never questioned. But there is an option to opt out of any sort of like AI surveillance at Disney specifically. And then there was somebody to answer data questions about this particular collection of data at Disney. And they do claim that they delete all data after the visit ends. So this is like carefully navigating that regulatory landscape around facial recognition. But still some of the issues that we face when it is implemented at a public service organization like Disney is that the transparency around this technology is really low. Even right now, like 10 years after the seminal paper was introduced, and opting out, even though it's an option, it is difficult. And the procedure itself is presented as a barrier. And I know at TechBetter, they talk a lot about AI ethics and morality. And I do agree with their take on the fact that biometric collections seem unnecessary specifically for Disney. You can read more into it, like why they do it, the way they do it, and why they specifically use biometrics for solving the specific issue that they have. But my main takeaway from this is like even an organization who is doing it right as per the current regulations, there are still some barriers when it comes to users, when it comes to user agency in particular. So with that, I will move on to the fun stuff, which is generative AI, which everyone is talking about these days. When I try to put it in this emerging technology evolution curve, my personal opinion is that we are somewhere here. We haven't peaked in terms of the hype yet. I think Elon Musk talking yesterday about AGI and how it's going to materialize next year. And I think it's just like the word AGI is what is keeping this inflation going up, or like making it peak higher and higher. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because a lot of people have different perspectives on like AGI, what it is, when will AI surpass human intelligence? When will AI be better than like the real human? Like I know there's like kind of empirical measurements like the Turing test, for instance, but I think at this point it's kind of vague, right? Like AI is already better at like chess, Go, Jeopardy, you know, and it's kind of hard to evaluate when progress is being made when there's not really a clear metric to evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is like tremendous potential of what AI can do.
Yeah.
But it's really like I think certain tasks humans will always be better at it. Certain tasks AI will be really helpful, and there's certain tasks where like AI will propel humans to do their work better. And that's where I'm like really excited about.
Yeah, I totally agree. But do you see how like a lot of the conversations in this stage is like technology driven? And do you see the parallels between some of the videos I showed where like earlier on, it was like really about the technology. Like AI can do that, or like facial recognition can do this, can do that, can do this. And I feel like since we are in this stage, it is kind of like validating to Gartner cycle specifically that we are still following the same pattern, that we are like putting the abilities of the technology first and like talking around that. The news is around that. The hype is around that. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like there's one thing to kind of think about like what the technology can do, and there's another to think about how it can really solve like the problem that the end user really wants to solve, right? And it's really like the AI is only as good as how it can benefit the end person using the product or the tool or the modem on which you kind of are using it.
Yeah. And
I'll
yeah, Christy, go ahead.
Oh no, I'll also chime in that it's like really interesting because you would think that a solution that saves people a lot of time and money, like there would be really strong sentiment around it. But we see a lot of like people these days kind of resistant to the sudden change. For example, I saw this like really long thread of people getting really angry at Sora because it's like, oh, there's these artists who spend so much time making all these videos and it's replacing jobs. And someone brought in like a really interesting point. They were saying that back then, people were really threatened by like the blur tool in Adobe Photoshop because they thought that the pixel by pixel blur job would be replaced. But now it's like such a fundamental tool that saves people so much time. And I think slowly we will be moving that direction in terms of building stronger sentiment around like support for something, especially around Gen AI. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to add one point to that, is that generative AI, because of how it uses language, it has already broken out of that bubble of like tech only, or like digital creators, like everyone who is in the digital market. So when it broke out of that bubble, the urgency to bring everyone in on the same page and kind of talk about some of those fears is more urgent than it was with some of the previous technologies. So I think this is what I really wanted to talk about through this conversation we are having, is to really like look at the trajectory, look at the timeline. We have seen these before, so we can learn from those experiences and kind of like navigate this in a way that is inclusive of everyone, essentially everyone who would be a end user of AI. So with that said, I wanted to like quickly touch upon the failure points, specifically of a Gen AI application. So there is the LLM model part, which are like models like OpenAI's GPT, Google's Gemini, and then there is the infrastructure that's around it. So if it's hosted on like AWS versus Microsoft is setting up the infrastructure. There is all the connected resources around it. There is the data in the backend. There are like API calls, plugins. And another important part is like the people who develop it and the people who use it. And I think like if we think about the failure modes of an application, I'll talk more about what I mean by failure, can be like categorized into these 4. And then this ties directly to the risks associated if an attack on these failure modes by somebody with like the wrong intent, then the risks when it comes to organizational success essentially falls into misinformation, harmful content, data breach, and system breach. I'm happy to like chat more about this, but essentially what it all comes down, the implications of this is that it's harmful to humans. These are the four categories it comes down to when we are specifically talking about generative AI. Especially, we hear a lot about misinformation, harmful content, and then data breach and systems breach has always been there. But essentially, like tying it back to issues like biases, issues like underrepresentation, or like disproportionately targeting minorities. And this all kind of ties to the technology part of it, the training, the data behind it, but also reflects to problems in society in large. I'll skip this part, but one thing I want to leave the audience with is the idea of responsible AI and how a lot of enterprises or companies or people who have adopted AI, what really mattered between a successful adoption versus a failed adoption was a user-first approach. And it can all be tied down to some of the tenets of responsible AI as laid out by team at Google AI, but just focusing on the ideas behind it, which is that it boils down to a human-centered approach. It boils down to really looking at the failure points. One is the data and understanding the limitations of the data and the model, and this idea of monitoring for all these failure modes, monitoring for the risks, monitoring for the implication, and if you put it all together, monitoring for harm against the users. I know that we covered a lot in this talk, and if there's like one thing I want you to leave away with is to really see if you can draw parallels between what we talked about for object detection as an AI technology from another time to generative AI as an AI technology that's evolving and kind of going through that same circle.
Yay.
So with, I would like just make
Wow.
one final point. I know we are running out of time, and also like this will be hosted in our platform. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to message me or add me on LinkedIn. I could talk about this for hours. But what are your thoughts, Christy and Nathan? And thank you for like bearing with me
No,
talking.
not. It was super interesting, and I really appreciate you sharing your perspective in terms of, I think quite often we go down like a rabbit hole of very specific Gen AI, and it's interesting to see AI being implemented in different industries, as well as maybe like the sentiment around it in other fields. Love to see like I love seeing your thoughts about where you think it's headed, what we should be aware of, and making sure we're more human-centric. And yeah, everyone should definitely check out Anna's LinkedIn. It'll be linked in the description, everything, and check out more of all of her work. I thought it was an amazing talk. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you guys for the opportunity and partaking in this conversation. And I hope we can have more conversations, include more people into these kinds of discussions, and share the resources as wide and far as possible.
For sure. Thank you so much, Anna. I think we can call this an end, and don't forget to like and subscribe.